Alright. Interview with Todd. Take one. Let's see here. Alright, Todd. What's up, dude?
We doing this?
Yeah. So, how long you've been sober from drugs and alcohol for, what, 8 years?
8 years, yeah. May 10th, 2015 is my date. Started when I was 15. You know, I got into skateboarding and punk rock and drank for the first time when I was 15 years old, and I knew that that was something I wanted to keep doing, and I wanted to do it as often as I could. And I did. By the time I ended up going to college for a little bit, and that was the first time that I was able to drink every day, and so I did. And college did not go well for me as a result. I went to school down in San Marcos and mainly just kind of lived in the dorms and swam in the river and fucking drank Pabst Blue Ribbon every night, and flunked out pretty quickly. Went back to Plano where I grew up.
Stop for a second.
Yeah, flunked out of college. Back to old Plano, Texas. You know, continued drinking, working some bullshit jobs. Was working in some gyms. And decided at 21 years old, I moved to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and you know, I already loved drinking, and that's a casino town with 24-hour bars, so great drinking town, and I pretty quickly found cocaine there, which you know, really lets you keep drinking. So I had an overnight job. I worked nights, went in at 10 p.m. and we'd get out of work at 3, 4 in the morning and go to the bars, drink every night, doing cocaine. I loved cocaine, and I soon found, you know, I liked snorting it, and then I eventually was introduced to smoking it, which was really, you know, when there started to be some consequences. I started smoking a lot of cocaine, and then I discovered from there that, you know, a little snort of heroin was a great way to come down off of a crack high. So found myself in rehab for the first time in 2000. So I would have been, 27 years old, almost 28, and that's where I was first introduced to the 12 steps, and that was when I very quickly decided that that was something I was not interested in doing. I was never going to have anything to do with 12-step programs. I didn't believe those people. I didn't think that anybody that drank or got high like I did could be happy without it, and especially not happy like these people claim to be, you know. So that was definitely crossed off my list right away. And so I spent the next 15 years trying to manage, and, you know, in and out of rehabs and detoxes, and the consequences started piling up. But I just kind of, you know, I was willing to put up with a lot of things in order to keep doing the drugs and alcohol, because, you know, I think somewhere in my mind I believed that those were the only things that worked, that made me feel, you know, normal, whatever the fuck that means. And so things got bad. I picked up a couple, you know, I moved to Austin in 2001, kind of backed off the heroin at least, but there was still a lot of cocaine and a lot of drinking. And after I was in Austin probably 4 years when I picked up my first DWI, and very quickly picked up a second DWI while still out on bond for my first. And at that point, they put me on the Scram device, the ankle monitor thing, where I couldn't drink alcohol. And even at that point, you know, even with consequences like that, sobriety never even crossed my mind. Like, it wasn't an option for me. I was working in a bar at that time, and I can remember I literally thought when they told me I couldn't drink alcohol, I was like, well, I got to do something. And pretty quickly found a girl that did Oxycontins and started snorting those, and that led me right back into heroin, and this time it was full-time heroin, all day, every day. And that was the next, you know, so that was starting in probably 2008, and that it was IV heroin and cocaine all the way up into 2015. And that's when, again, always consequences. I was always getting arrested. I'm a convicted felon. I've got a couple other felony arrests, but mostly more than I can count bullshit misdemeanor arrests. Paraphernalia. A lot of I would go for not paying my traffic tickets. But yeah, in and out of jail. Losing jobs, losing relationships. I went out to Vegas at one point. My sister was living in Vegas, and she was like, "Well, why don't you come out here?" Because it was, Austin was the problem. If I could just get out of Austin, then everything would be fine. That's what I would tell myself, and I would tell my sister, and she, my sister wanted to believe. She wanted to believe me. She wanted to believe that I was trying. And so I went to Vegas, and that was probably my darkest time. I spoiler alert, I did not get my shit together in Vegas. It was, I was at my very lowest there. I had never been so strung out. The drugs were really good and really cheap and really easy to get. And it was bad. I was bad. And I kept a job. I got a job that I kept for maybe 3 months, and couldn't hold it together. And I started, started shoplifting every day. I met these kids out there in one of those pay-by-the-week motels, and all day, every day shoplifting and selling. At the end of the day, we had this guy that would buy whatever we stole, and that's how I stayed high. And I stayed really high. I was out there, and my sister knew that things were bad, and she helped me get into a detox in Vegas. And I was there a week, and I walked out of that detox after 7 days and got into my car and called the drug dealer. I called the Connect and got high again. But my sister let me move in with her, thinking that I had detoxed and thinking that I was doing okay. And of course that didn't last long. And she gave me the boot, and I ended up back in Austin one more time, and I lasted about 6 more months. By this point, the consequences, like going to jail and losing relationships and losing jobs, that stuff was bad, and that wears on you. But by the end, it was just this misery. It was like somewhere in my mind, I knew that the drugs weren't working anymore. They weren't doing what they used to do, and that's a scary feeling, And also around that time, it was dawning on me that even though the drugs weren't working and I didn't really want to do them anymore, I couldn't fucking stop doing them. And that's a scary feeling too. And all of that combined, it was just this crushing, I wanted to kill myself is what happened. All I could think about was dying. And, I had a job in a bar. That was my last job before I got sober. And of course I'm strung out and I'm sick every day, and I couldn't keep a job at a bar. And, my last 3 weeks were, in this apartment. The girlfriend was leaving me again, because that's how it went. And, she was going to go move in with her mom in San Marcos. And so for a couple, 2-3 weeks, I was just alone in this apartment. She was gradually moving shit out, and it was like
North Las Vegas?
No, at this point I'm back in Austin.
Oh, okay.
I'm on St. Elmo at the Arts, yeah. This was with Ashley. And, it was like I'd be sick for a day or 2 or 3, dying, kicking heroin. And then somehow I'd scrape up $20 and get high for a day and do it all over again. And it was just laying in this bed sick and thinking about dying and wishing I had the balls to kill myself, and really wishing that I could scrape up enough money to do a big enough shot to fucking end it all. That's what I thought about all day. And it all came down, the morning of May 10th. The girlfriend was back for the weekend, and long story short, we had this blow up fight in the morning of Sunday, May 10th, and I said some crazy shit. I threatened to kill myself. I think I grabbed a knife, and she just left. And next thing I know, I hear sirens in the distance, and I knew as soon as I heard those sirens, I knew they were coming for me. And sure enough, I peeked out the blinds after about 5 minutes, and I could see them down there circling around. They were looking for the apartment, and I ended up in the psych ward for a few days. First time in a psych ward, but they came in that first night, and the doctors came in, and they were like, "Hey, we think you're probably okay. And they were talking about letting me out the next morning. And I remember I didn't say anything. Like, I didn't react because I think the reality was I didn't want to leave because I didn't know what I was going to do, you know. Breckenridge Psych Ward, yeah. And I don't know if they picked up on that or what, but they just left me alone. And that whole next day, I just laid in that bed. And, you know, places like, you know, like that psych ward, or when you would end up in jail, it was almost a relief because you knew you didn't have to go hustle for dope. You know, you knew you were there and you weren't going anywhere, and you could at least just lay there and be sick, and you know, the drugs weren't an option. And that's kind of how I felt in the psych ward. But, you know, and again, but there was also this... you know, I just kind of afraid, like, what the fuck am I going to do when they let me out of here? Because I couldn't, you know, I didn't have it in me to keep doing what I'd been doing. I didn't have the energy for the hustle, and I didn't, you know, and again, you know, somewhere in my mind knowing that these fucking drugs weren't working anymore, so what's the fucking point anyway? You know, it was kind of how I felt. So, it's like I said, they just, you know, I don't know, they picked up on that. They let me, you know, the whole next day, I just laid in that bed and nobody came and fucked with me. And then my second night there, same doctor comes in and they're like, hey, we think we found a place that you can go detox. Excuse me. And so, and again, at this point, I was just like, whatever, you know, tell me where to go, because I'm fucking out of ideas. And they got me into this the 15th Street Respite. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Jay, but it's not exactly a detox, but that's where I detoxed, and I was there for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 days. And the people there, you know, walked me through the process. They got me to go get the funding for treatment, and they, you know, they called the treatment centers for me. They gave me some options and got me into, like, hey, we can get you into Austin Recovery. You know, we think it's where you should go, and so I did. And even after all that, you know, so at this point, you know, it was a couple days in the psych ward and 8 or 10 days in detox, and I got into the rehab, and I still didn't really want to get sober. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but sobriety it's not like I was chomping at the bit to get sober, you know. And for all the, you know, those 15 years of managing, I think, like, you know, the idea of sobriety was terrifying, because, as you know, and I've heard other people say this, but it's like, as bad as things are when you're out there getting high, at least you know what to expect every day, you know. But sobriety was this fucking unknown, you know, and that was scary to me, because, you know, I'd never had a solution. You know, of course, I'd had 30 days here and 5 days here without drugs, but it was miserable, you know, because I had no solution. It was just, the drugs were taken away, and I was still stuck there with myself and, you know, my same shitty thoughts and shitty feelings. And so anyway, you know, I'm in Austin Recovery, and I got there on a Wednesday, and I remember it was the first Saturday morning I was there, and this guy came in to bring a meeting, and as it turns out, he came every Saturday morning, but I didn't know that. But he's probably in his early 50s. You know, at the time I was 42. And tattooed guy, old Austin punk rock guy, and he started telling his story. And for the first time ever, I listened, you know, and I could relate to this dude, and I was like, holy shit, you know, it sounds, you know, had been a heroin addict, and you know, a lot of similarities. And then he says, you know, he found AA, and he's got, you know, close to 20 years sober. And dude seemed like a happy, you know, kind of normal dude with his shit together. And that was kind of the beginning of it. That was the door cracking open, I think, you know. And a little more time went on, and I think I'd finally been there about a week and a half. And it was all sort of dawning on me, like, my situation was dawning on me. I was like, you know, I was realizing that I'm going to get out of this treatment center eventually, and if I don't do some different things, you know, I'm going to be right back where I was, and that fucking terrified me. And so I just very quietly decided that I was going to give AA a shot. I was going to give this 12-step thing a shot. And I say I quietly did it because I was embarrassed. Like, there was a part of me that was embarrassed because I'd spent the past 15 years talking shit about what a bunch of bullshit AA was and how weak-minded people, just the typical, running my mouth about something that I didn't know anything about. And, so I'd shut the fuck up and I started listening. And at that point, like I said, I'd been there about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And I went to my counselor and I was like, hey man, I've decided I want to really give this thing a shot. And is there any way I could maybe get a couple week extension so at least I get the full 30 days here, to get the most out of it or whatever. And they made that happen. And so I spent 6 weeks there. And while I was there, I got a sponsor. And, I shut up and I started listening, and I decided I was going to, give it an honest go, and got out of treatment, got into sober living. And, it was tough because at this point, my family, they'd heard it all for so many years that they were really reluctant to help me. It took my counselor calling my mom to basically beg her for the $300 that I needed to move into to an Oxford house in Austin. And they didn't want to do it. My mom and my stepdad did not want to do it. They had been helping me and getting burned for years. And I guess finally, like, my mom talked to my sister, and they both kind of agreed that they would, they'd put up $150 a piece and, maybe take a little gamble, because I think my counselor had pleaded my case pretty good. But so I got into sober living, and I started going to meetings, man. I started going to meetings every day, as many as I could. There were days I'd go to 3 meetings. Started meeting with my sponsor every week. I started doing the work and going through the steps. And I did. I did it. I did the work, and I went through the steps. And it took me probably, I was about a year sober, maybe a little less, when I finally got through the 12th step and was able to start sponsoring people. All kinds of things happened during that time. I did the amends process. I got to step 9. I made amends with my dad, who I hadn't spoken with in 15 years. And that was huge, He ended up passing away about a year and a half after I did that amends. And, I can't imagine what that would have been like if he had passed away and I had never talked to him, if I had never, done what I did to try and make things right. So that was a huge thing. And so, May 10th of this year, I celebrated 8 years. I still go to a few meetings a week. I still have a sponsor. I sponsor dudes. I got 3 dudes that I sponsor right now. And, I do this thing the best that I can. By no means perfectly. I still have a ways to go. I still have things to work on, just like everybody else does. I found, since getting sober, it's like stopping the drugs and alcohol for me were actually kind of the easy part. It's, what they call the emotional sobriety. It's learning how to be an adult and how to, not act like a child and not throw temper tantrums when you don't get your way. It's learning how not to be selfish and learning how to, have gratitude and learning how to be present and, being a helpful contributing member of society, So yeah, that's where I'm at today. And
have you had close calls, like to where you came close to picking up drugs, narcotics?
No, I really haven't. I think I was fortunate, and I know it doesn't work this way for everybody, but I think when I decided, when I surrendered, when I had my proper first step experience, I think I was done. I think I had taken it so close, I'd wanted to die, and I took it, my bottom was so fucking low that I think I was done. And I haven't, the obsession was removed, and I haven't seriously considered, taking a drink or a drug. I sometimes I entertain myself with thoughts like, what would happen if what would happen if I picked up that drink and drank? I do.
Or me, for instance,
Yeah.
had it would entertain my thoughts with, well, that's not my drug of choice. I'm gonna check that out a little bit, because that's not what brought me to my knees. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and again, unfortunately, I've done, pretty much everything. So I never really got into meth, and that doesn't really appeal to me. And look, I'm not immune to that. I'm not saying that couldn't ever happen to me, but I also think that I stay plugged in enough to AA that, fortunately for me, that hasn't been the case for me. I haven't seriously entertained drinking or getting high, and I honestly, I don't want to find out what it would take for me to get to that point, I know, if I stop doing this shit, if I stop going to meetings, if I stop sponsoring guys, if I stop talking to my sponsor, there's probably a good chance that I would get to that point where maybe taking a drink or a drug would seem like a good idea. But
I'm almost positive that it would.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I'm an addict.
Higher power, but I can probably tell you that you'd wind up
eventually
fucked up
for sure. If I turned my back on all this and walked away, eventually, I'm a fucking drug addict and an alcoholic. That's what I do. And without this program, that's where I'd eventually end up back to. I know that. So yeah, and I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out what I'd have to stop doing in order for that to happen. So I try to, stick with it enough that hasn't been a problem.
I would say most likely. You die.
Oh yeah,
because I know when I relapsed, I was overdosing twice a week.
Well, especially considering, definitely opiates are my thing, and with the shit that's out there right now, I would, there's probably a good chance I'd fucking OD on my first high,
I should have been dead. So I was like,
yeah.
Why wouldn't you be dead? It's just a toss-up.
Totally.
We're gambling with our lives.
It's a fucking miracle that I'm alive now, that I didn't die when I was out there. I overdosed enough times to, 2 days, it was May 8th, the Friday before I got sober, 2 days before I got sober, before my sobriety date, I overdosed, and they just, Chalmers Courts, they just happened to have some Narcan there. One of those people hit me with it, and, yeah, I've had plenty of close calls, and I am absolutely lucky to still be here, So, yeah.
What do you do when you feel like you're having a bad day and you're sort of in resentment or in a a selfish state of mind and you're just negative?
Yeah,
or do you practice the steps frequently enough to where you don't go there much?
Well, no. I think, everybody gets there. It's a matter of, catching yourself and recognizing, and a lot of it, and I heard somebody share not long ago, a friend of mine at a meeting, and it was and I really like this way of looking at life. It's she was like, I don't really have problems anymore. She goes, life happens, and I get to decide, whether or not how I react or whether or not I react at all, and that's a good way to look at it because, you practice acceptance, and you got to remember that there's fucking most of everything that happens is out of your control, and if you don't accept that, you're going to have a bad fucking day, you can not like it and you can get sad about stuff, but if you just keep fighting and I don't like this and these people don't act right and that guy drives like an asshole, you go through life like that, you're going to have a bad time. And you got to just be like, that's, that is not in my control. That is not in my control. That is not in my control. And if you can keep recognizing that, or at least as often as possible, it makes things, you give a much fucking smoother life. And sometimes it gets to you. I fucking scream dumb shit at people while I'm driving or whatever, but I don't let it ruin my day, I don't dwell on it. I don't go talking about it for the night, I don't have a shitty experience on the highway on my way to work and then go talk about it for 8 hours to all my coworkers, at some point I remind myself, that's fucking life, dude. People are dicks and there's really nothing you can do about it,
Because that person that does go talk shit for 8 hours to his coworkers. I mean, I've been that guy.
Absolutely.
And I also have seen that guy, and I'm like, that person is just spreading negative energy,
Yeah.
dude.
Oh, and I mean, that used to be me, dude. I mean, I worked in customer service, man. When I was in the height of my addiction, I loved to have a real asshole of a customer because it gave me something to focus on for the rest of the day. You fucking believe what this lady said, and that would be the rest of my day, worrying about what some other motherfucker did, and letting it ruin my day, and it was a great way to not focus on my own fucked up life, obviously, but, it's a shitty way to live,
Yeah.
And yeah, I have absolutely been that guy. And I can easily slip back into that if I don't watch myself, and that's the thing. It's practicing all that shit and, staying on top of how you show up and, continuing to do the step work, and you continue to take inventory and keep an eye on how you show up in life every day,
That's, you kind of took the word life right out of my mouth. Because we evolve in life, and it never stops.
Yeah. Well, life's not going to stop happening.
I see, a guy that my dad, for instance, was 75 years old, would still talk like I used to talk to people when I was 19, cussing people out, tearing them down. And I'm like, he's 75 years old. But everyone matures at different levels and comes at life and evolves differently. But that's what this thing is. We're just constantly learning and yeah. So you said 8 years.
8 years, May 10th, was 8 years.
8 years, wow.
Yeah.
Still taking it day by day?
Yes, sir. It's the only way to do it.
All right, well, maybe we do a follow-up, dude, in like 6 months or something. Yeah.
I'm down.
Maybe you'll have your Ferrari.
Probably not. Maybe a different Crown Vic if I'm lucky, but
yeah. All right, sweet, bro.
All right, man. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Todd.
Yeah.